The night was alive with the quiet clinking of cutlery and the soft murmur of conversations in the elegant restaurant. Golden chandeliers hung like suspended suns, spreading a warm glow across polished tables where wealthy patrons dined in silk and tailored suits. In this atmosphere of refinement, waiters and waitresses moved like shadows, unnoticed, efficient, invisible. Among them was Laura, a young woman with a humble smile and a grace that came not from money but from quiet dignity. 4 months, Laura had worked here, carrying trays heavier than her shoulders could bear, enduring long hours and whispered jokes from colleagues who envied her poise. But she never let the weight of their words bend her back. What no one knew was that behind her calm face lived a woman of intellect, someone whose dreams had once soared higher than the vaulted ceilings above her. Tonight, however, fate decided to tear the curtain hiding that secret. A gentleman seated at one of the corner tables beckoned Laura. He was foreign, his accent sharp, his manners refined. When he struggled to make himself understood in English, Laura instinctively replied, not in broken phrases but in perfect French. The air shifted. Conversations at surrounding tables slowed, forks paused mid-air. The smooth melody of her French filled the room, not just with words but with authority. Her accent was impeccable, her rhythm confident. And as the dialogue deepened, she wasn't simply translating. She was discussing economics, business trends, and investment strategies as if she had been seated at a corporate boardroom rather than balancing a tray of wine glasses. The foreign client's eyes widened in admiration. Diners nearby glanced toward her with surprise. A waitress? Conversing like a seasoned strategist? It wasn't common, and that rarity only magnified the impression she left. For a fleeting moment, Laura's apron and uniform vanished. She was no longer the girl serving food. She was a woman who commanded respect. But not everyone saw it as brilliance. In the kitchen, one of her coworkers smirked as she passed. "Do you think speaking French will change anything?" he mocked. "No matter what you know, at the end of the day you'll be back here scrubbing glasses." The words struck her like stones. Laura's chest tightened but she didn't reply. She knew jealousy when she saw it. Still, each insult left a scar, each remark a reminder of how trapped she felt between her reality and her unfulfilled dreams. What Laura didn't notice was the man at another table. Dressed in a dark suit, his posture commanding, his eyes sharp and observant. Julian. A millionaire, a businessman known for building empires and dismantling egos. He had seen countless waiters, countless faces carrying trays without ambition. Yet tonight, his attention was fixed on this woman who broke every assumption he held. As Laura moved silently through the dining hall, Julian couldn't help but remember his own beginnings, those years when no one believed in him, when people saw him as insignificant. Why is she here? He wondered. Why is someone with such a mind trapped in this place? By the time he left, Julian carried not just the memory of a fine dinner but the image of Laura's voice, her confidence, her resilience. It lingered in his mind long after the night ended. The next day brought no kindness. In fact, the air grew heavier. Laura felt the eyes of her colleagues burning holes in her back. They whispered, they snickered. One supervisor mocked her openly. "Here we don't reward people who show off their languages. We reward those who obey." Laura lowered her gaze, biting her tongue. Inside, her soul screamed that she was more than this life, more than aprons and orders. But survival demanded silence. She swallowed her anger and carried on. That evening, as she cleared a table, her heart skipped a beat. Julian had returned. He didn't ask for food or drink. He simply requested her presence. Nervously, she approached, expecting a complaint. Instead, he reached into his jacket and placed a white envelope in her trembling hands. "A chance," he said simply. "One you shouldn't refuse." Then he walked out, leaving confusion in his wake. Customers stared, staff exchanged puzzled looks, and Laura clutched the envelope to her chest as if it were a lifeline. Alone in the kitchen, she tore it open. Inside lay a handwritten note and a plane ticket to Paris. The letter was brief but powerful. He had overheard her, seen her talent, and believed she was destined for something greater. He offered her an opportunity, details left unsaid, only a promise that he believed in her capacity to rise. Laura's eyes blurred with tears. Not sadness but fear mixed with hope. Could this be real? Or was it too good to trust? That night at home she shared the news. Her mother frowned deeply. "Don't trust a rich man who appears from nowhere," she warned. "He will only destroy you." Her brother scoffed, his voice harsh. "You're really going to throw everything away for some stranger's promise? You don't even know who this man is." The opposition cut deeper than knives. Instead of joy, she received reproach. Instead of support, suspicion. Yet within her, a small voice whispered not to let the chance slip. Over the next few days the torment only grew. At work, coworkers mocked her. They called her desperate, accused her of finding a sugar daddy, instead of earning anything on her own. Their cruelty piled on her doubts. Each insult felt like chains dragging her deeper into resignation. Still, every night she returned to the envelope, pressing it against her chest. A decision loomed. The ticket had a date. Use it or lose everything forever. The ticket rested on her table like a silent dare. Laura couldn't look at it without her pulse quickening, without imagining an entirely different life that waited across the ocean. Yet every time she tried to dream, her family's words dragged her back into chains. Her mother's warnings echoed, "Don't trust a man who comes out of nowhere." Her brother's scorn haunted her. "You're foolish if you think you're leaving everything for some empty promise." She lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, torn between two worlds. The walls of her room felt tighter with each passing day, suffocating her. She replayed the conversation in French with the foreign client, the admiration in his eyes, the strength in her own voice. How could she forget that moment of confidence, when she had felt alive, valuable, unstoppable? But then came the doubts. What if Julian isn't who he seems? What if it's a trap? What if leaving means losing everything familiar? At work, the pressure mounted. Gossip spread like wildfire. Co-workers whispered behind her back, their eyes full of envy and contempt. One of the waitresses leaned close as she passed and sneered, "We knew you wouldn't go. In the end you're just like the rest of us, too scared, too ordinary." The words struck harder than they should have, because deep inside Laura feared they might be true. Fear had always been her prison, and now its walls grew higher each day. The envelope had become her secret companion. She carried it in her bag, held it at night, pressed it to her chest when no one was looking. It wasn't just paper and ink. It was hope. It was possibility. It was the reminder that maybe, just maybe, her life could be something more. Then came the night that shattered her resolve. Laura sat in her dimly lit room, the envelope lying on her desk, glowing faintly under the weak lamp. She whispered to herself, trying to summon courage. "I can do this. I must take the risk." Her brother barged in without warning. His eyes were sharp, his jaw set. Before she could react, he snatched the envelope from the table. "This isn't for you," he spat coldly. With brutal hands, he tore the letter into shreds right before her eyes. Each rip was like a blade through her heart. "No!" Laura cried, lunging forward, but it was too late. The fragments fluttered to the floor like dying birds. "You won't ruin your life for some unknown millionaire," he said harshly. "You think this is a fairy tale? Wake up. You belong here, not chasing fantasies." Her mother appeared at the doorway. Instead of defending her, she joined in. "He's right, Laura. You don't know what kind of man this is. He could destroy you. Better to stay here, safe even if you're frustrated, than to throw your life away on a stranger's promise." The betrayal cut deeper than the torn letter. It wasn't just her dreams being destroyed, it was the very people who should have stood by her ripping them apart. Laura collapsed onto her bed, tears soaking her pillow, her voice trembling. "You don't get to decide my life for me. I'm not a child." But no one listened. They left her there, broken, her heart pounding with rage and despair. That night she gathered the shredded pieces of the letter and placed them carefully in a box. They were worthless scraps, but to her they symbolized what she was losing, her chance, her dignity, her hope. She held the box close, whispering through sobs, "If I let this go, I'll never forgive myself." The following day at the restaurant was the hardest yet. Word of the torn letter had reached her co-workers. They smirked, whispered, and laughed openly in her presence. "I knew it," one said. "She thought she was special, but in the end she's just a fool who couldn't take the leap." Laura's hands trembled as she poured water into glasses, her throat burning with swallowed rage. Every insult felt like another nail in the coffin of her dreams. She had never felt so invisible, so mocked, so utterly alone. When her shift ended and she stepped outside, the air was heavy, her shoulders bowed. That's when she saw him, Julian. He was waiting at the entrance, tall and composed, his sharp eyes fixed on her. Laura froze, shame burning her cheeks. She couldn't meet his gaze. "I'm not going," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if admitting it out loud would kill her. Julian's expression didn't change. For a long moment he said nothing, then finally replied, his words firm and cutting. "You don't disappoint me, Laura. You disappoint yourself." The words struck like a hammer. Her chest tightened, anger and sorrow colliding. Deep inside she knew he was right. She wasn't rejecting him, she was betraying herself. That night, alone in her room, Laura opened the box of torn paper. She ran her fingers over the jagged edges of the fragments, each piece a symbol of fear and broken courage. She wept until her body ached. But then, as she stared at the pieces, a memory surfaced. The sparkle in the foreign client's eyes. The strength in her own voice as she spoke French with pride. The confidence she had once felt, the certainty that she was more than her uniform. It hit her with clarity. The greatest prison wasn't her brother, her mother, or her coworkers. It was her own lack of self-belief. In that moment, something inside her shifted. Fear still clawed at her, but beneath it, a spark of determination glowed. She whispered to herself, "If I don't take this step, I'll remain a prisoner forever." And with that, Laura made her decision. She would risk everything. The next day, with the shredded pieces of the letter still tucked in her bag as a reminder, she made her way to the airport. Her heart thundered, her breath uneven. Every step felt like defiance, not against Julian, not against her coworkers, but against the voices that had chained her all her life. When the airport gates came into view, she felt tears prick her eyes. The plane was ready. The ticket was still valid. It was now or never. Laura's heart raced as she clutched the boarding pass. The airport buzzed with travelers pulling heavy suitcases, announcements echoing overhead in different languages, and the faint smell of coffee drifting through the air. Every step she took toward the gate felt heavier than the last, as if invisible hands were trying to pull her back. She glanced around, half expecting her brother to appear out of nowhere, ready to drag her home. But no one stopped her. No one even noticed her. She was just one more passenger in the crowd. And for the first time, that anonymity gave her strength. Her hands trembled as she handed the ticket to the attendant. A beep, a nod, and then she was through. She walked down the jet bridge, her breath shallow. When she stepped onto the plane, her knees nearly buckled. This was it. No turning back now. As the engines roared and the plane lifted from the ground, Laura pressed her forehead against the window. The city below shrank, lights flickering like scattered fireflies. Tears blurred her vision. She whispered, "Goodbye," not to the city itself, but to the version of her who had always been too afraid. The flight felt endless, her mind trapped between fear and hope. She gripped the torn scraps of Julian's letter tucked into her bag, the fragments like tiny witnesses of her courage. I may not have the letter anymore, she thought, but I still have the choice. When the plane touched down in France, her chest swelled with nervous anticipation. The air felt different as she stepped out, cooler, sharper, filled with the sound of a language she loved but had never dared to embrace fully. Paris. The city she had dreamed of, the place she had thought unreachable, was suddenly beneath her feet. Julian had written nothing about where to go, but she had the courage now to find him. Pulling her coat tighter, she walked through the crowded streets until she found the cafe he had mentioned in his last note. Elegant and bustling, its windows glowed warmly against the chill of evening. Inside she spotted him at once. Julian sat at a corner table, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. He rose as she approached, offering the faintest of smiles. "You came," he said. His tone was calm, but she saw the flicker of surprise in his eyes. "I'm here," she replied, her voice firmer than she expected. He gestured for her to sit. The cafe hummed with conversation around them, but for Laura the world narrowed to the man before her and the possibilities he represented. Julian leaned forward. "I meant what I said, Laura. I believe you have a gift, your languages, your insight into business, your courage. I want you to work with me. An international project. One that requires someone like you." Her chest tightened. Sounded too good. She studied his face, searching for deception. "Why me?" she asked cautiously. "You could hire anyone. You don't even know me." He held her gaze. "Because I heard you that night. I saw the way you held your own in a conversation meant for executives, not waitresses. And because I recognized something in you, the same fire I once had when no one believed in me." Still, doubt clung to her. She crossed her arms. "If this is real, show me. Don't treat me like charity. Treat me like I matter." Julian reached into his briefcase and slid a folder across the table. Inside was a contract. Her hands shook as she flipped through it. Pages of promises, responsibilities, and terms. But as her eyes moved across the lines, her stomach sank. Some clauses were unfair. Some tilted entirely in his favor. Laura looked up, meeting his eyes with unexpected boldness. "If you really believe in me, you'll change this. Right now." For the first time, Julian seemed caught off guard. People rarely challenged him. Most accepted whatever terms he offered. Yet here was a young woman, fresh from a restaurant job, holding her ground. Silence stretched between them, heavy as stone. Then Julian nodded slowly. "You're right." He pulled out his pen and right there in the middle of the cafe he began crossing out clauses and rewriting terms. Laura watched in awe as the contract shifted, not from his generosity, but from her insistence. For the first time, someone wasn't just giving her an opportunity, she was shaping it for herself. When he handed it back, the document reflected her worth. Her voice mattered. Her boundaries were respected. Laura signed it with a steady hand. From that moment, her life changed. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Julian introduced her to international partners, and her ability to switch seamlessly between languages left them impressed. Meetings that once terrified her became opportunities where she spoke with confidence, her mind sharp, her ideas valuable. She worked harder than she ever had before, often staying late to study contracts, proposals, and negotiations. But this time, her effort was fueled not by survival but by ambition. Each day she proved to herself that she belonged here, not because a millionaire gave her a chance, but because she earned her place. News of her transformation spread quickly. Articles highlighted the young woman who went from waitress to international strategist. Former colleagues at the restaurant saw her name in the papers, their whispers turning from mockery to envy. Laura didn't care. She wasn't living for their approval anymore. Her family, at first bitter and disbelieving, could no longer deny what they saw. Her mother wept the first time she saw Laura interviewed on television. Her brother, once her greatest opponent, could not look her in the eye when she returned to visit. Their shame was its own apology. But Laura didn't carry bitterness. She had no room for revenge. She was too busy building the life she had always deserved. And as she stood in a glass tower overlooking the city, documents in her hand and determination in her heart, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Months turned into a year, and Laura's life unfolded in ways she had once thought impossible. The timid waitress who had whispered her dreams in secret had become a woman whose voice carried across boardrooms, conferences, and auditoriums. The project Julian brought her into grew rapidly. Laura wasn't just a translator or a silent assistant. She became the bridge between cultures, the strategist who saw details others overlooked, the mind who could unravel problems with a clarity that impressed even the most seasoned executives. In meetings, men twice her age leaned forward to listen. In negotiations, she held her ground with a calm strength that demanded respect. But what made her story remarkable wasn't just her professional success. It was the transformation of her spirit. For the first time, Laura believed in her own worth. Every contract she signed, every deal she closed, every speech she gave was a reminder that the girl who had once been mocked for showing off her languages was now celebrated for the very same gift. Her family's resistance had crumbled under the weight of reality. When she visited them again, they looked at her with a mixture of pride and regret. Her mother embraced her with tears, whispering apologies for doubting her. Her brother, silent and humbled, simply nodded. It wasn't the apology Laura once craved, but it was enough. Back at the restaurant where it all began, her old colleagues heard her name again and again, this time in news articles, on social media, and even in televised interviews. Some of them remembered the night she spoke French, the night they laughed at her. They whispered among themselves, "She made it. She actually made it." Their envy now turned into shame. Laura didn't seek revenge, nor did she return to prove anything. Her victory was not in showing them she had risen, it was in no longer needing their approval. One evening, Laura stood backstage at an auditorium in Paris. Rows of seats stretched out before her, filled with young students, professionals, and dreamers who had come to hear her speak. Her palms were damp, her heart raced, not out of fear but out of gratitude. She remembered the girl who once trembled at insults, who once believed her dreams were foolish. Now she was here to tell others what she had learned. The host introduced her. "Please welcome Laura, a woman whose story reminds us all that courage can change destiny." Applause erupted as she stepped onto the stage. She paused for a moment, letting the sound wash over her, then began to speak. "I was once a waitress in a small restaurant," she said, her voice steady, carrying through the hall. "I wore a uniform that made me invisible, but inside I carried dreams I didn't dare share. I thought I had to stay where life placed me. I thought my fate was sealed." The audience leaned in, listening to every word. "One evening, I spoke in French to a customer. That moment changed everything. Not because it brought me luck, but because it reminded me of who I truly was. For years, I hid my talent because others mocked it, because my family feared for me, because I was afraid to stand out. I let their voices chain me. But when opportunity knocked, I realized the biggest prison wasn't the restaurant, or my family's disapproval, it was my own lack of belief in myself." Her voice grew stronger, passion filling every word. I was given a ticket. Not just to Paris but to a life I never thought possible. I almost let fear tear it apart. I almost let others decide for me. But I chose to take the risk. And that choice, scary, uncertain, lonely, changed everything. There was silence in the auditorium. Even breath seemed to pause. She looked out at the faces staring back at her, some with tears, some with awe, all with hope flickering in their eyes. So here is what I want you to remember, Laura said, her voice softening but carrying the weight of truth. Never let fear or the voices of others decide your destiny. Dignity cannot be negotiated. Talent knows nothing of uniforms or labels. What matters is that you never give up on yourself. Because when you finally choose to believe, doors you never imagined will open. The hall erupted in applause, louder than before, echoing like thunder. Laura bowed her head humbly, her heart swelling. She hadn't just told her story, she had given others permission to dream. After the talk, young women approached her, asking for advice. Men spoke to her with respect, eager to hear more. She realized then that she had become more than a success story. She was an example, a living reminder that courage is contagious. Julian, who had been in the audience, approached her quietly afterward. I knew you were strong, he said, pride in his eyes. But I didn't know you'd become this powerful. Laura smiled, not with arrogance but with gratitude. I didn't know either, she replied. But sometimes you don't discover your strength until the world tries to break you. In the years that followed, Laura's influence grew. She worked across countries, building businesses, mentoring young women, and standing as a voice for those who felt invisible. She was invited to conferences, honored with awards and featured in magazines. Yet she never let the glamour blind her. She remembered the restaurant, the torn letter, the nights of doubt. Those memories grounded her, reminding her that respect and dignity were treasures more valuable than wealth. One evening, while walking through the streets of Paris, she paused by a cafe window. Inside, she saw a young waitress clearing tables, her shoulders slouched, her eyes distant. Laura recognized that look, the silent exhaustion, the buried dreams. She smiled faintly, remembering her own journey. Then she walked inside, left a generous tip with a small note, and whispered to the girl as she passed, "Don't ever stop believing in yourself. The world is waiting." The waitress looked up, startled, clutching the note. She didn't yet know who Laura was, but perhaps one day she would. And so the story of Laura was not just about a millionaire's ticket or a stroke of luck. It was about the moment she chose to believe in her own worth. A decision that turned humiliation into dignity, doubt into strength, invisibility into inspiration. In the end, her greatest lesson was not in French or business, it was in courage. Because courage, once chosen, changes everything.